Welcome to the Geek Homeworld. I am your host, SavageTechman. We talk sci-fi, TV, movies, superheroes, and all from a geek perspective. You can find us on Blogger, Google+, Twitter, Facebook. We're everywhere. Join the Geek Homeworld.
Join us now as we peer into the future, into geeky concepts and conspiracies. The truth is out there, but is it real? What is real? What is fact? And what is fiction? Listen up and you decide.
This is SavageTechman, also known as Ed, and I am hosting here another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast, where we talk about everything in the geek world. I am joined once again by the lovely, the wonderful, the exceptional...
Really?
Cheryl.
Hello.
A.K.A. Palace Princess. And we are talking this time about 5 geeky concepts and conspiracies. Are they possible? Can they ever exist?
Anything's possible.
Yes, but...
No. That is not the X-Files music.
It's not? Oh, okay.
I've told you this before.
All right. Well, let's just dive headlong straight first into the first one, our most favorite one, time travel.
Yeah, I think about time travel all the time because of the way you drive.
That's true. And
when you go flying around a corner, I always say, you don't have to slingshot us around the sun. We're not going to time travel.
Okay. There's a good Star Trek reference there. But I was going to say, roads, where we're going, who needs roads? Back to the Future. Every sci-fi genre has touched on the concept of time travel using basically wormholes. We saw in Deep Space Nine, of course, they pretty much had a wormhole they could open and close at will, and they just went through that sucker, and they ended up...
Was that wormhole about time travel, or that wormhole was about traveling great distances?
it's all the concept, the time.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're talking about the space-time continuum, and they're all being the same thing, but I'm pretty sure that wormhole was more about distance than about time travel.
I will have to give you that. That's true. That's true in that sense.
And there are lots of other ways of traveling through time and in different
space.
genres, of course. I mean, sometimes you do have those time rifts that you get a lot of times in Star Trek.
Yes. Yeah, like one of my favorite episodes is yesterday's Enterprise, where you have the Battle of Narendra 3, where the Enterprise comes back, I think it's the Enterprise B, comes back through time, and they have to go back to the battle, and great episode. But Star Trek, oh my gosh, they do so many...
Star Trek is constantly
It's constantly about time travel, basically. It's kind of like a quantum leap in a way, but different.
Well, I mean, yeah, quantum leap was a different kind of technology for time travel. Mm-hmm. That the scientist could time travel using his machine, but only during his own lifetime. But for some reason, to other parts of the world, so he very rarely came back as himself, but inhabited somebody else who was alive at the same time he's been
It reminded
alive.
me of The Greatest American Hero, because it's like he couldn't really get to the right. He couldn't use the technology.
Well, but the whole concept was that they were having to rush because they were going to lose their funding, so they weren't really ready to get started.
Right,
That's why they had so many problems.
I know you're a big Quantum Leap fan.
I am a big
watched
Quantum Leap
every
fan.
single episode, definitely.
Many times, probably.
But like in Star Trek, I learned what Kerr loops were. Getting so many wonderful, especially in the Next Generation, so many elements of time travel that Star Trek used brilliantly, and it's just unfathomable. No time travel without the fact that you can warp through space is a form of time travel. I mean,
well,
you're
yeah.
moving forward.
I mean, if you look
using
at
a wormhole in that sense is also
what might be actually possible. But Star Trek does a whole lot of time traveling.
Yes.
But as you mentioned, Quantum Leap is specifically about time travel. Mm-hmm. Of course, the other big genre that's specifically about time travel is Doctor Who.
Yes.
And our regular listeners will know that we had never seen Doctor Who, and people always thought it was odd because I'm such an Anglophile and
seen an episode, but never really stuck.
But this isn't true anymore for me, anyway, because I have started watching it in the last month or so, and now...
You're becoming a Whovian, right?
I'm a Whovian all the way. I've seen most of the episodes with the 10th Doctor. I've seen most of the first season with the 11th Doctor. So I'm trying to watch them in order. Unfortunately, my DVR didn't record the first season for some reason, so I still have to get that. And, of course, I don't have any of the older stuff from the beginning, but Doctor Who, I think shows some of what real time travel, like if we could travel through time. This is the reason why I don't think it's possible at least to go backwards in time,
right.
Because if we did, then we would know things like people want to know who built the pyramids.
Exactly.
Like somebody would have already gone back to figure that out. All these unanswered questions. What happened to the princes in the tower? What, who shot Kennedy? All that kind of stuff. Speaking of conspiracies.
Who shot JR?
All these conspiracies could be resolved if we could travel back in time.
Yes.
And so in looking at the real world possibilities of time travel.
Before you say that, I was just thinking about Back to the Future when you're kind of vibing off of what you're saying there. There's so many time paradoxes. Like if you went back and you saw who killed Kennedy, and you changed anything, it's the butterfly effect, which is the first movie was a great movie, the second one terrible. But you could mess up the whole space-time continuum, changing timelines by interfering. I mean, doesn't Doctor Who do that a little bit?
Well, he does, and that's the funny thing. Like in one of the first episodes with Martha Jones is his companion. She's like, "Oh, should we really be doing this? What if I step on a butterfly?" And he's like, "Why would you do that?" And she's
That's
like,
cruel.
"What if I kill my grandfather?" And he's like, "Are you planning to?"
Because that was hilarious. Because we were watching the Shakespeare one the other night.
They go back to Shakespeare.
But you were talking about real life.
Yeah, so in real life, there are a lot of scientists who are working on concepts involving time travel. And Dr. Mark Raymond, who runs a blog for NASA and addresses questions from people who send them in, he says basically we are all traveling in time. We're all traveling forward in time at the rate of 1 hour per hour.
Wow.
But
I travel slower because I'm late.
Yeah, you generally do.
I'm from the past.
But he also says, according to Einstein's theory of special relativity, you can travel, the faster that you travel, the slower that time moves. So if you travel very fast, you could essentially age more slowly as time continues to move relatively more quickly around you. Right. So if you were traveling at the speed of sound, you would take less time.
The speed of light?
If you went... I'm sorry, the speed of light. Well, speed of sound, too. I mean, speed of sound is faster than we move. But if you traveled at the speed of light and then came back to Earth, everyone that you knew would be like 50 years older, and you would only be slightly older. So that's what they're working on. How do we do that? And then, of course, the other one of Einstein's big theories, the theory of general relativity, says that objects move more slowly in a gravitational field, so you can slow time down where there's a heavy amount of gravitation, and that's why they do see distortions around areas of high gravity like black holes. And so Dr. Raymond says, and you're talking about the wormholes, that scientists do theorize, some do, that you could use wormholes to travel through time, but they don't know if it's actually possible because of the high levels of gravity that you could do it without being crushed or destroyed.
It creates such pressure. And maybe, I don't even know if it's necessarily called a G-force, but I know the pressure would be so great that I think you'd have to limit the size of your craft, because the bigger you are, I would think the more pressure you would have exerted upon you, or I don't know. The bigger your actual signature, as it were, ship signature, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and Dr. Raymond also says that, even with current space travel that we've been doing for, almost 50 years now, that because of the distances and the speeds involved, they do encounter very small fluctuations in space-time that they have to make account for, that we wouldn't necessarily notice, but that would have an impact on the things that they're trying to do, like trying to land in a specific place or whatever. So they're already having to do this, and we know that these things exist, and it's possible to speed up or slow down time because of speed and gravity, but the kicker is no current theory, no feasible theory says that you could ever travel back in time. You can only travel forward. And so, if no one has come up with a feasible concept for how you could possibly travel backwards.
And also,
but if I could, I would. I mean, just like Dr. River Song in Doctor Who, she's an archaeologist basically, and so why wouldn't you travel back in time if you're an archaeologist? If you're an historian, like I said, you would go back.
Jean-Luc Picard would love to.
You wouldn't have to just dig in the dirt to find things. You could just go be like, oh, that's what the Incas are doing today.
Hello, dinosaur. Goodbye, dinosaur. That opens up to kind of tied into our second thing here: alternate realities and parallel universes. The Flash television series deals with Earth 1 and Earth 2, and Flash can go so fast that he essentially can time travel. We could be doing the podcast. There could be someone in a parallel universe who's much uglier than me because there's, which couldn't be possible. But, that's podcasting.
Not sure I can follow that argument, but in sci-fi, again, in so many of the genres, you have this idea of parallel universes or alternate realities. And one of the most basic ones, of course, is that there's an evil version of you and a good version of you. Right. Like, you see that in the original Star Trek series for sure. Of course, for some reason, the evil people always have beards or something. Like unless you're a woman, then like the evil version of you is always dark-haired while you're blonde. Even that even happened in I Dream of Jeannie, but that wasn't a parallel universe. That was her sister. Anyway, that's a sideline. But in Doctor Who, you have the concept of parallel universe is also introduced, and that's how he loses Rose, which I'm not really sad about. She's not my favorite companion.
Well,
sorry, y'all.
Sorry, Rose.
Sorry, Rose.
I thought you meant Rose from Titanic. Yeah, let her freeze. Chill, baby, chill.
No, but you have basically multiple universes, and there are in science today this idea that they call multiverses, which is basically the same concept that there are multiple parallel universes existing at the same time in different dimensions. And so it's arisen out of like the study of quantum mechanics, which looks at the activities of very small things like how gravity impacts on atomic particles, and then also on string theory, which is really complex, and I don't know that I understand it well enough to even begin to explain it, but one of the things that string theory says is that there are at least 10 dimensions, only 4 of which we have been able to observe, and those, of course, are height, width, depth or space, and time. And, but according to string theory, there are 6 more, and we don't really understand or know what those are yet.
They could be dimensions in which spirits live.
I mean, maybe spirits are just in an alternative reality, a
the
parallel
police always
universe.
said we're just spirits in the material world.
Oh, the police as in Sting Police.
Sting and
I thought you meant law enforcement.
The police, no.
The popo.
The popo.
And I can remember one of my favorite books as a child was A Wrinkle in Time by Madame L'Engle, and the way that she explained like the bending of space-time as sort of a 5th dimension was like if you laid out a string, then the points on either end of the string would be very far apart. But if you could bend the string, you could actually bring the points together and create a loop.
That's essentially a wormhole in a way.
And this is what, they come back to. And so right now, scientists are trying to figure out ways to create experiments to try to observe anything that would help support this idea about multiverses. Because they come back to the idea, and this is very conceptual, I think, that there are things that exist that we can't observe, and that doesn't mean that they don't exist. That if we say only that which we observe is real, then we're limiting
then you get into God exists, but maybe in a dimension that...
But if the idea is only what we can observe is real, then...
On a plane of existence,
Until we saw, another star, there wasn't another star. Until we saw another planet, there wasn't another planet. Well, that's not true.
Before the Hubble telescope, we couldn't see anything.
Right. And all those things still existed.
Right.
We just couldn't observe them.
And the thing about that is when you're looking into space, you're seeing stuff you're getting the light from stuff that existed billions of years ago.
Right.
You know?
So maybe they don't even exist anymore.
You know.
But, it comes back to that. The most common way of expressing it today, and certainly anyone who watches The Big Bang Theory will have heard of Schrodinger's cat.
Right.
The idea that you put the cat in the box, and until you open the box, you don't know whether the cat is alive or dead. And so therefore, theoretically, the cat is both alive and dead. Because you're not observing it, it could be either.
Right.
So because it could be either, it could also be both. Or something like that.
Wow.
And
the more you think about it, is it the egg or the chicken, which came first? And it can just space-time continuum, alternate realities can just totally mess with your brains.
Well, the whole, just trying to think through it, but if any of these things are discovered, like if they do find a way to find evidence of these parallel universes bumping into each other, which would have to happen, they say, we sci-fi geeks won't be surprised about it. We'll be like, yeah, we've been saying that all along.
We've been saying it forever. It happened on Star Trek.
Duh.
That kind of leads us into our third thing on our list here: extraterrestrial technology, implants, abductions, attacks, and annihilation. All in one. That's a bad day, if you ask me.
Pretty much, yeah. Especially if it's your implant that explodes.
And if you need one source to go to, you might as well go to the X-Files. They deal with all of that, including brilliantly on the new season that started, including the fake alien takeover America that they're saying. People are taking that serious. A lot of fans really said they couldn't believe, there are a lot of conspiracy theorists out there, and they believe that there's going to be a fake alien takeover of America, that on a Friday, the banks will say they'll have to shut down because of some computer error. Then there'll be a fake terroristic attack where the EMP exploded, and they'll blame it on terrorists or another country, and it'll be a takeover of a country by this elitist group that controls everything, and they may even use holographic alien ships to fake an invasion of the U.S.
Well, once you once you start digging into any of these conspiracy theories like that, there's the idea that there's been this huge cover up for the last, since 1947 at least, about UFOs, that there's been all this disinformation that it really does exist.
Right.
But then there's an alternative conspiracy theory that the idea that these alien things were invented as an excuse, as a way of explaining away advanced technologies that we were working. And really, I tend to think along that way, because we had these descriptions, for instance, of so-called alien ships.
I'm a Mulder and you're a Scully, definitely.
Well, you have these descriptions of this triangular-shaped UFOs. And then, comes to find out years later, guess what the stealth bomber looks like,
Exactly.
So I tend to think more along that way, that we invented that if there's a conspiracy, it invented the aliens to cover up top secret developments.
And don't forget that the Monster of the Week episodes are going to have a good one tonight on X-Files, and X-Files does that better than most. But you know who the real monsters are? All of us. We don't have to look. Sometimes those monsters are inside of us. Oh, there's another dimension, another storyline.
Another idea.
One of my favorite reads, and it's been many adaptations of it, but H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, the original radio broadcast that scared an entire nation to death. They thought the Martians were taking over. Tom Cruise did the Steven Spielberg movie. It was 3 or 4 years after Armageddon, 9/11. Armageddon's another movie that, one of those
Deep
end of the
Impact.
world experiences and Deep Impact and all. But War of the Worlds, some of those scenes that close to after 9/11 happening, were very kind of scary and all that, and just the concept of that. And then there's always a twist to it. It's like in the end of one of the Men in Black movies, it may have been the first one, I can't remember, but they show a little child, like an alien child, and the alien child is playing with marbles, and they're the planets.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and Earth
Men
is
in
one
Black.
of
That's awesome.
And one of the characters in there said, we're just dumb humans, we're scared animals in big groups, and
Well, one of the things about these alien attacks, if you look back in time, like people were always afraid of the gods in ancient times, and then they were afraid of angels and demons, and so now when people stopped believing so much in that, then all of a sudden they're aliens. So there's always something out there.
Right.
As Fox would say.
There's truth is out there.
There's something out there that we're afraid of. And the interesting thing to me is that in so much of the culture and sci-fi, there's this violence and this conflict. Like, if we encounter an alien race, it's going to be because they're trying to conquer us.
Yes, sir. Or like an Independence Day resurgent, we have to fight to survive, and they're coming for our resources,
right?
Essentially,
but I guess I shouldn't be surprised about that, because I guess that's the history of human culture,
right? And when
destroyed other societies.
I remember when the president in Independence Day, he's talking through the aliens, and he says, "Well, what do you want us to do?" And the alien says, "Die." Like, oh gosh, no. I was like, kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
But then we do have exceptions to that in sci-fi with Star Wars, where you have lots of different species coexisting together more or less peacefully. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Star Trek, that's the whole concept behind, Starfleet and the... Oh, goodness.
United
Federation of Planets.
Wow.
Which might as well be a Homo sapiens only club, according to the Klingons. But you do have, and then of course the other things.
But there are.
But lesser intensity with the idea of abductions and implants and what are they doing to it. It all comes down to fear.
It is fear. And fear's the path to the dark side. And but one application that it can actually be pretty good. Well, this is a conspiracy. Well, it could be conspiracy, but it could be bad. Implants in the sense of like a chip, and
we're already using them on our pets.
Some people in the biblical sense say it's the mark of the beast. Some people say, having a chip, but a chip can be a good thing, like for dog trackers, and that goes under the skin.
I'm surprised it hasn't already gone from implanting into dogs to find your lost dog to implanting into children. With the great fear that there's a kidnapping. Because well, here's the thing though, but they're collecting children's DNA and blood, for instance, but that doesn't keep the child safe.
True.
That only means you can identify the child later. Whereas if you had a chip in your child and your child went missing, you could turn on the tracker and find it.
Another application that there has been considered is for Alzheimer's patients,
right?
And that would be but that's the thing about
we do have trackers in our phones now, and so how much further is it until the tracker that's in your phone is just in your wrist, or your neck or your head or wherever it is.
We give up a lot of our freedoms. And
I guess we'd want to put it in someplace different
for ease,
because you want to be like, it's always in your nose. Just to rip his nose off and you won't be able to track him anymore. You've been watching some
X-Files there. Another thing we get into is number 4 on our list is computer machine overlords and basically takeovers. The Matrix trilogy does that, one of the best ones. Are we living in a computer-generated world? And I should have called spoiler alert.
In case anyone hasn't seen The Matrix.
Yeah, including you.
But I know what The Matrix is about. I just don't want to watch it.
The wonderful Terminator series where machines rise up and on Judgment Day, and will the machines rule the world? And
you get it in X-Men too, right?
Well, the Sentinels to an extent, yes, you do. It depends how far you want to take it. Avengers Age of Ultron, our greatest protector that Tony Stark built was Ultron to put a shield around the world, as so to speak, and
like
they
you
had
were
to
saying,
destroy Ultron
everything that you put in place
us.
To try to protect also is something that can cause harm.
iRobot, starring Will Smith, one of my favorite sci-fi movies. The robot protectors basically turn on the humans, and this one robot named Sonny, who self-identifies basically as robot, is the title. He basically, Will Smith has a hard time trusting robots, but you find out that he is one you can trust.
Well, I guess I'm just not concerned about this one in real life. I mean, looking at real world applications.
I want a Roomba. I want a iRobot Roomba.
Well, yeah, but a Roomba is not artificial intelligence, and I know that they're working on developing artificial intelligence. Do you think
the Roomba gets mad though if it sees you throw trash down on the floor and then it expects you to come and or crumbs or something, it sees you eating, you think it will follow you around the house and say, do you really want to eat that candy bar?
No.
Oh, okay. 'Cause that would be scary.
No, so I just, I don't think there's ever going to come a point that will be reality. Somebody would have to program them to do it. They wouldn't just take over on their own.
Well, the wonderful show Humans that we watched, hopefully he's coming back for another season
British
soon.
show, yeah.
Yeah, dealt with that and how they become our slaves, so to speak, and our helpers around the house and everything else, and do everything for us, and then eventually they become sentient and they become
but they
people.
became sentient again because somebody gave them sentience. So this is the thing.
Well, there's Data's struggle to become human in Star Trek.
Well, I mean, it goes back to that very basic thing when in science in general. Just because you can do a thing doesn't mean you should do a thing.
That's from Star Trek.
But ultimately, well, I mean, it's not just from Star Trek.
Yeah,
that's from real world too. But
you're right. But we may be 50 years away, more or less, from sentient robots, and eventually it would make sense that they would become sentient. At some point, they would evolve. Their programming would evolve because chips have gotten smaller, more powerful, faster,
but they still would have to have self-determination in order to do that.
Well, that's the whole.
I don't
question.
know where that step is.
But the fifth and final thing on the list, I think, is probably the scariest of all the things that we've talked about.
Oh, what's that?
The fear that all these cool, futuristic, and frightening concepts may not be possible or ever occur. Remember, the truth is out there.
Or is it? That is not the music. I knew you were going to do it. That's not how it goes. That's not how any of this goes.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Geek Homeworld podcast with your host, SavageTechman. You can find us on Libsyn, Google+, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, listen to us on iTunes, see us on YouTube, be part of our Mixler chats. Thank you. See you again on the Geek Homeworld podcast.